What's the opioid situation from throughout Sampson County?
No doubt we have a problem. I think through the third quarter of last year, we had 4 individuals to OD here in Sampson County. We had actually 22 that went to the local emergency room last year. Fortunately, their life was spared and saved. I would say that's a pretty good number, alarming number.
So in 16 years, how have you seen the trends go?
When I first came into office 16 years ago, you know, the cocaine was the big deal, drug of choice. Marijuana was the drug of choice. Then meth came onto the scene. Prescription drugs were on the scene. Probably in 07, 08, we started focusing on the prescription drugs. And from the prescription drug perspective, it elevated up to the heroin because of the cheapness.
What's making opioids so popular as a product?
Well, it's cheap. And unfortunately, a lot of people, due to an accident, injury, or whatever, our doctors or our medical profession were prescribing, you know, pain pills. And once they reached that point where the doctors attempted to break them away from it, then they moved into the heroin because it was much cheaper, and it's highly addictive.
What types of people are you seeing taking opioids or falling prey to heroin, addiction, the illegal aspects of this problem?
It cuts across all levels, education, socially, you name it. No one is immune from it. Everybody, on all levels.
Is it like any other product out there? The more of it there is, the cheaper it gets?
Well, everything is supply and demand. Depending on the amount of the supply, it trying to be moved, in most cases, dictate the price. But anything that can be bought for $20, they're going to spend $20. And that's the alarming thing. Is it's kind of like the old song, "I Gots to Have It." Individuals that get addicted to the prescription drugs, then they move into the heroin scene or the meth scene or the cocaine scene, and it drives all crime. And you know, probably 95% of our occupants in the county jail, drugs probably was the biggest driving factor. Break-in and enterings, robberies, homicides, domestic violence, you name it. Every crime, fraud, is driven by the drug world.
People that get hung up in opioid addiction, are they, your opinion, are they good people doing bad things to satisfy their addiction, or is there a character flaw in there somewhere that's just the opioids brings it out?
I tell people it makes decent people mean people, okay? And what I mean by that is, you know, their focus changes. They have to have that drug. It has so much power and control over them that they're going to get it in some form or fashion. And the unfortunate thing is, you know, the families do everything they can to try to help them, okay? And it leads into the individual stealing from their families by way of forgery and utterance, by checking accounts, bank cards, stealing items out of the household. And nobody wants to get out there, no family wants to broadcast the fact, you know, that their child or their spouse or another loved one is doing that. And therefore, a lot of people, families operate in denial. But you can't imagine, you know, the number of family members that have contacted me or this office in an effort to try to get help, to find avenues to try to break that cycle. And the unfortunate thing is the loved one doesn't recognize or accept the fact that they've got the addiction. And there's not a whole lot, you know, certainly we can sit and listen and hear what they're saying, but until that loved one really wants to break that cycle, you know, it's a never ending. Unfortunately, not a lot can be accomplished. And, we do have a lot of substance treatment facilities. And what we find, or I have found over the last number of years, is they abuse these facilities. They abuse it from the standpoint that they're telling their loved ones, they want to go get help. Okay, well, that's music to the family members' ears because they think, yes, at this point, maybe we can accomplish something. But unfortunately, it's short-lived.
What do you think of those people who actually do beat it? They hit rock bottom, they go into recovery, and you know what? They turn their life around.
Well, and they're success stories, of course. Those individuals that have accomplished that. Unfortunately, that's the only hope that any family can have to break that cycle. We all, as I said earlier, we live in such a state of denial. It's always your child, it's your spouse, or significant other, that's involved with it, but they don't begin to fully grasp and understand, darn, I've got the problem, okay? They knew, from the peripheral standpoint, suspicious, but until the arrest starts being made, the trouble comes to them, then they say, oh my goodness, we got a problem, okay? And then they're out there, in fairness, as I would be as a parent, which I have 2 children, and fortunately, my wife and I were able to get them through those years where the social aspect, where these young people get hooked up and tied up with their friends, their peers, and it's just a real simple thing. They're not going to, I won't get hooked on it, but they get hooked on it. And it's really gut-wrenching, though, to try to, talk with parents and others, to help them work through the process to change their behavior.
There's only so much tax revenue to go around. And a government can either build jails, or they can build treatment facilities, or they can add beds to the hospital. How does a society, or a rural society like this one, balance that out?
Us, like any other law enforcement agency, and be it state, federal, or county, will never arrest out of the problem. Okay, there's going to always be arrest, but it drains every resource that the state and the feds and the counties have, allocated to deal with individuals. Granted, we had 4 overdose, deaths in this county last year. But can you imagine the number of individuals that went to our local hospital or other hospitals that may have had strokes, heart attacks, or other medical problems that was clearly driven, by some abuse of a drug? And it's astronomical. Just in this county, last year, there was like 3.2 million pills distributed, pain pills.
Legally or illegally?
Legally. If those 3 million pills, was placed in the hands of dealers, even at $20 a pop, can you imagine the amount of money that was expended on buying those pills? And it's got to come, the money's got to come from somewhere.